You've seen it in the movies, right? Someone codes, and there's this flurry of dramatic activity. But what really goes down in those first few critical moments when a heart stops inside a hospital, that's what we're breaking down today. We're going to look at the high-stakes procedure of an in-hospital cardiac arrest, second by second. So let's start the clock and dive into those first 3 minutes.
You might think it's pure chaos, but it's actually more like a highly choreographed race against the clock. Every single second counts. Seriously, what happens in these first few moments can literally be the difference between life and death.
So, okay, what actually happens? Well, unlike a cardiac arrest out on the street, an event inside a hospital has a very specific protocol. It's all designed for the absolute fastest response possible. And this isn't just for special team. All healthcare staff are trying to kick this process off instantly. And it all comes down to one number: 3. Just 3 minutes. You see, that's the absolute maximum window from the moment a patient collapses to the first attempt at defibrillation, if that's what's needed. 3 minutes. That's all you've got to recognize what's happening, react, and try to restart a heart. The urgency here is, well, you just can't overstate it. And no matter where this happens in the hospital, the immediate response boils down to 3 simple non-negotiable actions. First, recognize the arrest. Second, summon the expert resuscitation team. And third, start CPR immediately. That's it. These 3 things are the absolute foundation for everything else that's about to happen. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. This is not about guesswork or panic. It's a playbook, a very clear step-by-step sequence that any healthcare professional can and should start. So let's put ourselves in the shoes of that first responder and walk through exactly what they do. Now, they're not just pulling this out of thin air. To guide them, first responders use something called the in-hospital resuscitation algorithm. Think of it like a map or a flowchart. It gives them a really clear visual guide for every single decision, making sure the response is standardized and effective while they wait for the full expert team to get there. Okay, so before they even touch the patient, what's the very first thing they do? They make sure the scene is safe for themselves and for the patient. Only when they know the area is clear do they approach to check if the patient is actually unconscious. And how do they check for a response? It's a simple but incredibly effective technique called shake and shout. You literally but gently shake the patient's shoulders and shout loudly and clearly, "Are you all right?" And the answer they get, or the lack of an answer, is what dictates every single thing that happens next. That simple check creates a huge fork in the road. It's a real choose-your-own-adventure moment, but with massive stakes. So, on one path, if the patient does respond, the team kicks into an urgent medical assessment. It's called the ABCDE approach. But if the patient is unresponsive, that's our other path, and it triggers a completely different and way more immediate protocol that starts with shouting for help and checking for any signs of life. Okay, so let's follow that path. You've just found out the patient is unresponsive. The clock is ticking away. What do you think is the absolute most important physical action you need to take in this exact moment? You open their airway. Simple as that. Because without a clear passage for air to get in, absolutely nothing else you do is going to matter. The standard way to do this is with the head tilt and chin lift. It's a really simple move that just pulls the tongue away from the back of the throat and opens up that path for oxygen. All right, airway's open. The next check has to be super fast. We're talking less than 10 seconds. It's a quick look, listen, and feel for normal breathing. You're looking for the chest to move, listening for breath sounds, and feeling for air on your cheek. But here's a really, really crucial point. Sometimes you'll see these weird occasional gasps. That's called agonal breathing, and it is not a sign of life. In fact, it's a sign that cardiac arrest is happening and you need to start CPR like right now. So, no signs of life. This brings us to the single most important thing a first responder can do: high-quality CPR. And believe me, it's way more than just pushing on someone's chest. It's a real science. Yeah, that term high quality isn't just some buzzword they throw around. It has a very precise definition. What it's really all about is manually pumping blood to keep the brain and heart alive. And to do that effectively, you have to hit very specific targets for the rate, the depth, and the consistency of the compressions. It all starts with where you put your hands. It can't be too high or too low. You place the heel of one hand right in the center of the chest, specifically on the lower half of the sternum or breastbone. Getting this right means the pressure is going directly over the heart, which is what you need to maximize blood flow. So how fast do you go? This is your target rate. 100 to 120 compressions every minute. And yeah, you've probably heard this before, but that's pretty much the exact tempo of the song Staying Alive. It sounds a bit cliche, but it's an incredibly useful trick to keep your pace right in a super stressful situation. Next up is depth. How hard do you push? For an adult, every single compression needs to go down between 5 and 6 centimeters. That's about 2 inches. It might sound like a lot, but you need to go that deep to physically squeeze the heart and actually force the blood out into the rest of the body.
And finally, you've got the rhythm of the whole thing. The universal ratio is super simple. 30 chest compressions, then 2 rescue breaths. And you just repeat that cycle over and over and over, with as few interruptions as you can possibly manage.
But it's not just about the numbers. There are a few other keys to quality. For one, you have to let the chest fully recoil or come back up after each push. Why? Because that's what allows the heart to refill with blood. I mean, you can't pump an empty pump, right? You also have to minimize any hands-off time. And finally, this is exhausting work, so you've got to switch out the person doing compressions every 2 minutes to fight off fatigue and keep the quality high. So that first responder just keeps this cycle going. They're basically acting as a human life support machine, keeping that person alive during those crucial minutes it takes for the full resuscitation team to show up with all their advanced gear. And this right here is exactly why shouting for help at the very beginning is so important. If there's anyone else around, one person can immediately jump on the chest and start CPR, while someone else makes that critical call to get the resusc team on their way. You want things happening at the same time, not one after the other. And check this out. Even when the defibrillator finally arrives, the #1 rule is still to minimize interruptions. So one team member will be applying the defibrillator pads while another person is still doing compressions. Why? Because every single second your hands are off that chest, blood flow to the brain just stops. Okay, so in those last few moments before the cavalry arrives and takes over, the first responder is already getting ready for a super smooth handover. They'll pick one person to do all the talking. They'll use a structured tool like SBAR, which stands for Situation, Background, Assessment, and Recommendation, to give a quick, clean summary. And they'll try to have the patient's records handy. It's all about making that transfer of care as fast and efficient as humanly possible. And we're going to end on this quote from the source material, because if you take away only one thing, this should be it. In this whole complex, high-tech world of resuscitation, it all comes back to one thing: the simple, physically demanding act of continuous, high-quality chest compressions. That is, without a doubt, the absolute bedrock of survival.